Welcome, everybody, back to In Search of Civility. I'm Matt Erpelding from Micron Technology, and today we have a very interesting conversation with a group engaged in civility discussions and civility trainings across the state of Idaho called Bravery Angels. It's hard to believe that this is the 10th episode of In Search of Civility. And when Kelly Packer, Diana Laciondo, Luke Malik, and I came together to have this conversation, we wanted to have this conversation for the entire year and really bring it into not just our political environment, but into our community and into our homes with our families. And that's what our discussion is going to be about today. But before we get started with our guests and before I bring my co-host today in, Kelly Packer, I just want to talk a little bit about the uniqueness of In Search of Civility. In Search of Civility is a unique partnership between the Boise Metro Chamber of Commerce, the Association of Idaho Cities, and Smith & Malik Law Firm. The three of us have come together to put together the content of this, but we couldn't produce this and deliver it without our sponsors. In Search of Civility is presented by Dawson Taylor Coffee and Idaho Central Credit Union, and sponsored by Power Engineers and Erdstad Architects. And finally, our ability to deliver this across multiple platforms is the result of many media partnerships. Our partners, Idaho Ed News, the Idaho Statesman, and the Idaho Press, have been invaluable to us and have helped us move this forward throughout the year. So with that, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Kelly Packer. Welcome, Kelly. How are you?
Great. How are you, Matt? Great to see you.
I'm doing well. It's nice to see you. Give us a little bit of an overview on what we're going to be talking about today and why we've decided that October is a good time for that.
Thank you. I will. I'm excited about this. As I've mentioned before, I've had the distinct pleasure of being involved with the National Institute for Civil Discourse. I am currently the co-chair for the next generation arm of that association or organization, and they have recently joined with Bravery Angels to expand the footprint of civility, not just amongst elected officials, but as Matt mentioned, in families and neighborhoods and other organizations and businesses. And so as we discussed what we'd like to see in a future show a few months ago, this was one of the topics that rose to the forefront. It's important that all of us engage in this critical discussion and that we all commit to being a better person each day, to doing a little bit better, to be a little bit kinder, to be willing to approach conversations in a respectful manner, no matter who we're talking with, whether it's at the dinner table or across the fence in our yards with our neighbors or in a community forum, even an elected forum, a city council meeting, a county council meeting, the legislature, etc. With that, we decided it was an awesome time to have Bravery Angels on, and today, if I may, I
did want to point out one thing that you and I kind of talked about, and that is, I think this is also appropriate because we're coming up on elections, both school board elections and city council elections. And the reality is conversations are taking place in our homes. They're taking place across the dinner table. And as we get close to Thanksgiving, the dreaded Thanksgiving with our families, we're thinking about how do we communicate in an environment that is just increasingly polarized.
Right. In fact, funny story, my husband a few months back posted something on Facebook that talked about elected officials or politicians, right? And something that they had done. And it was ironically a topic that I had been engaged in while I was a legislator with you. And so I called him and I said, I just read your post. And I just thought you should know that you're talking about me. He said, no, I'm not. I said, oh, yeah, you are. I said, in fact, if you would, from now on, just put my name right in there before you post something, that would probably be helpful. And he immediately took it down. He really had not thought about it that way. And I think that happens a lot. We say things and we make blanket statements and disparaging remarks and so forth without thinking about who's on the receiving end of that.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's really easy for us to objectify one another, whether it be, all Democrats or all Republicans are terrible, all elected officials are terrible. And what it does is it feeds into that narrative of there's no reason for us to show any respect because everybody's out, in a way that's not helping our community. And that's really hard. And we've all done it on social media.
I'm guilty. Yep. You bet.
Well, are you ready to introduce our guests?
I am. I'm thrilled to introduce them. So we have two gentlemen joining us today that are the representatives for Braver Angel. Damian Preinitz is pursuing a BS in general biology at Boise State University. He was honorably discharged from the U.S. Army after 3 years of service in 2020. And Damian, we thank you very much for that service. He joined Braver Angels in December of 2020 and became a state coordinator for Idaho in August of 2021. He has gone through the moderator and ambassador training for Braver Angels. Welcome, Damian. Thank you. It is now my privilege to introduce Rob Hansen, his co-representative for Braver Angels in Idaho. Rob is a retired soil scientist who served in the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality for 32 years. During his career, he was responsible for mine site remediation, voluntary cleanup, and general remediation programs, including managing the Bunker Hill Superfund site for the state of Idaho, which taught him a great deal about finding common ground in contentious environmental issues among federal, tribal, local stakeholders. Rob has received recognition from the Idaho's governor and the US EPA for his work to move complex projects forward to meet cleanup goals. Rob is a moderator, an Idaho State co-coordinator, and the Mountain Region lead for Braver Angels. He has visited conflict zones in Chiapas, I'm not sure if I said that right, Rob, you correct me if I didn't, Mexico, and in Southern Colombia, where he has been a liaison with the Sanctuary of Peace Church for over 20 years. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you. It's great being here.
All right, if you don't mind, we'll jump right in with the questions. Rob, the first question is going to go to you. Tell us how Braver Angels got started and how or why, maybe both, you got involved with them in Idaho.
Sure. So Braver Angels started in 2016, right after the presidential election that was very contentious. And through the work of Braver Angels, they had coordinated with a family counselor named Bill Doherty. And he just saw like this country was going through a severe marital problem, separation type things. And so he used some of the concepts from his family counseling to put together what we call is the Red Blue Workshop. And it's the signature workshop of Braver Angels. And one of the things that Braver Angels has strived to do from the very beginning is have equal participation and equal leadership and equal funding even between the conservatives and the liberals. And the language you typically use is red and blue. And so they held this workshop in Ohio, and you can actually watch this workshop. There's a documentary on the website, braverangels.org. You can go watch that. And the thing that really is exciting when you watch that workshop and then as you participate, and it's one of the things that really drives me, is it shows that it's possible to talk across the political divide. And it helps you find out that divide isn't so huge, that there's actually a large amount of common ground that we have. And I just find it really uplifting, just about everything that I've done with Braver Angels, even sitting, in boring business type meetings. But the workshops like that are really, really valuable to help teach people how to talk with each other across the divide.
Thank you, Rob. So critical. And Damian, how about you? Why did you get involved in Braver Angels?
So I got involved because as a result of the 2016 election, I saw a lot of the polarization and division starting to grow. And then in the 2020 election, it really felt like it was coming to head to me personally. I saw the issue on BSU. A lot of conservative students were feeling like they were underrepresented or unvalued, at least from what I saw. So I actually made a speech project about trying to bridge the divide among students at BSU. And because I'm kind of lazy, I looked up to see what other organizations were already trying to do it to base it off of them. I saw Braver Angels. I watched their documentary, and then I thought to myself, after doing the speech presentation, I want to be a part of the solution. So I contacted Rob, and I said, hey, I want to show up to the next meeting, and then here we are.
Damian, one of our questions and one of the things that we kind of have been grappling with is are we really making and impact in improving civility in our communities. And so I want to ask you, given your time with Braver Angels and the work that you're doing, do you see us making inroads? Are we making a difference in improving civility in our communities?
I have seen it personally through Braver Angels. One of the things I saw the most improvement through, at least personally, was with one-on-one conversations where you can talk to another person that has a differing viewpoint, whether that be politically, rural versus urban, different races, and even ages. You can talk with somebody who differs from you greatly and civilly talk about issues that we're facing. At BSU, which is one of the problems that I was personally seeing, they made the Institute for Advancing American Values, which is trying to combat the problem that I saw on BSU's campus. And right now here in this In Search of Civility podcast we're talking about right now is showing that we see it's a problem and we're trying to address it. And the only way I think we can fix it is by civilly talking about it. So even just having this conversation right now is progress. Yeah.
You know, Rob, lots of organizations are doing this work. I mean, we have the National Institute for Civility, we have Braver Angels, we have other groups, we have this podcast, we have a lot of people that are all pushing toward the same goal. And how does Braver Angels fit into this niche? And how are they really striving to make improvements beyond having conversations? Because it's one thing for us to all have conversations, another thing to take that next step, which is action within the community.
Yeah, Matt. One, I think it's just so exciting to see the groundswell of organizations like this one and Braver Angels that are really trying to figure out how to make democracy work better in this country. The thing that Braver Angels does is, as you mentioned, is fundamentally we start off and it's doing the workshops and figuring out how to speak to each other. The overarching objective of Braver Angels, though, is to have an impact in our communities and to be able to model behavior in our communities and also to our elected officials. And so Braver Angels uses a lot of different tools other than just the workshops. You can go on their website and you can see that they do Braver Angels debates. And if you haven't had a chance to sit on one of those debates, you can sign up for one, or if you go on the Braver Angels YouTube channel, you can go back and watch one. For example, they had Braver Angels debate on racism several weeks ago. And the proposition was America is a racist country. And then you had speakers who would speak pro to that proposition or that resolution and con to that resolution. And you watch that and they lined up like 8 speakers who really knew their stuff. And I walked away with you would think like, boy, that's not going to be a fun discussion. But I learned so much. And the Braver Angels approach isn't like there's someone, the pro side's going to win or the con side's going to win. They describe it as a collective search for truth. And, it's not always just black and white. You find there's a whole bunch of different perspectives in between. And so those debates are a great way to model how do you get past that high level kind of, no, you're right, I'm wrong, down to like a little deeper. Oh, I didn't understand that nuance. Well, this is something a little bit different that I didn't even think. I didn't even know that. And so it's trying to model the behavior. And then after when we create these, have the workshops and we create enough energy in terms of number of people, the vision for Braver Angels is to have what we call alliances, local alliances in every community in the country, where they can take on specific issues for the community and bring together people from different perspectives and have the conversation and really try to solve problems. So there is that aspect of trying to get in and get more involved in the community, but also and to continually to help people to be better equipped to carry on the conversations. And then this coming year, the Braver Angels is also starting to take a move to get more involved in politics. Now, Braver Angels is nonpartisan, and we don't really take positions on issues. Our whole thing is to show and figure out how to do politics better by having open conversations with respect and understanding and a desire to solve a problem and not to win or lose. So it's a big task. but it's a growing organization, and new things are happening all the time. So, and then we're looking to collaborate. I mean, just the opportunity to be on this show today is really great, and we're really appreciative of it.
Super. I love the fact that you talked about how you're encouraging people to collectively find the truth, right? I think that that's so critical in everything that we do. And in fact, recently I had the privilege of teaching a civility workshop at a conference for city clerks and treasurers and financial officers. And in there, we talked about one of the components that I shared is that too often we come to conversations with our opinions already firmly in place, right? And what we think it should be or look like, period. And we don't budge from that. And that, I think, causes a lot of the problems. And so I asked them and encouraged them. I said, start coming to conversations. And I said, I take this challenge myself as well. Start coming to conversations with 3 things in mind. I may be wrong. Of course, I kind of rolled my eyes at that, but no, I'm just kidding. It's true. Come to the conversation with, I may be wrong. I may not know everything. And they might actually have some good ideas, right? I think that's really helpful place to start from. Have your ideas and opinions formulated, but come with an open mind of willing to admit one or all of those 3 things. And so, Rob, I would pose to you this question. Are there other tools, or could you expound even on some of the tools that I just talked about that you think will help changing one's mind, or finding that common ground between people easier and maybe even acceptable?
Sure. I think the best lesson that I learned through Bravery Angels is you come together, and if your first purpose is to change that person's mind, you've set yourself up for failure. It's not going to happen. And so go in with the goal to better understand. And so it's a lot about asking questions and digging deeper. If they just say, well, I just think it's right. And you don't need to be standoffish. You can say, yeah, I know that's important to you. Can you tell me a little bit more about why that's important? And you just try to better understand. And once the other person sees that you really care and really interested, they kind of start opening up. What I found in these conversations is if you do that, they oftentimes reciprocate. If they don't necessarily reciprocate, you might have to say, hey, I come from a little bit different perspective. Can I tell you my story? And so it's using language a lot of like, this is my story. They're not going to argue with your story. It's it. But if you say, well, I know that this is the right way, or I know that the truth is this, we all know this, you've already set it up like, well, if they don't agree with you, they don't know. And so you're closing the door on that conversation. And as you have those types of conversations, you're listening to each other's stories, you're repeating back to try to better understand that I get this right. You start building some trust, and then they might even ask you for opinion or say, this is the way I understand it. Do you understand that different? And you start getting deeper into what you can be talking about. So those are just some of the things that Bravery Angels has taught me. And I guess probably another thing I picked up is from a book by Jonathan Haidt, The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Separated by Politics and Religion. And he basically suggests that when you're talking to someone, find out what's really important to them, those things that are really sacred to them. And then you kind of start seeing what drives them. And that's, you need to respect those areas where people really feel that strong importance. And, just try to understand that. And those are just some tips. I've had a fun conversation with a friend of mine, and, we spend 2 or 3 hours just talking, and we're from very different political perspectives, but I learn a lot. And I think he enjoys the conversation. In fact, he invited me, let's do another lunch. This is coming up. So anyway, those are just a few tips.
Damien, when I was in the legislature, I was invited to this program through something called the Kettering Institute. And the Kettering Institute had a civility program at the time. This would have been about 7 years ago, focused on what they were calling wicked issues. And these wicked issues are things that are so complex that the political argument of I'm right, you're wrong cannot possibly lead to a solution. And I've always kind of grappled onto that term, wicked issues. There's a question in the comments box that kind of addresses that, and we'll get to the question I have for you, and that is, Brad's asked, how do you have a civil conversation about politics and how to solve problems when a person's ideas about solving the problem will actually make it worse? But this is the kicker, and I don't think this is intentional, but it's because of their ideology, they don't care. And it's very easy, and it was very easy for me as the minority leader in the legislature to get to a place where I was so jaded that everyone else's ideology was wrong and they didn't care about it. What are some aha moments that you've had where you've learned that maybe somebody else's ideology maybe wasn't as inaccurate as you had assessed it? And what are some of those personal experiences that you've had that want to keep you doing this civility work through Braver Angels?
Yeah. So one that comes to mind most clearly is there was a one-on-one conversation I had with this lady, and we came on totally different opposites of the political divide and could not see eye to eye on almost any policy that we were discussing. But since we knew that we needed to discuss it civilly and respectfully, I was able to learn more about the value systems that were going into her decisions on which side she wanted to lean on and how she wanted to tackle policy. And she hopefully learned from me my value system on how I wanted to tackle these issues. And it was more of we both saw the same problem. And that was my aha moment for me, is we just had different ideas on how we were going to solve it, because we had a different value system and more of a different understanding of what risks we were willing to take on what issues, on what we were willing to sacrifice to solve the problem. And that was more of the discussion that we were having, is what does it take to solve this issue and what are we willing to sacrifice? Because it's going to put in work somewhere. Something has to be sacrificed in order to solve the problem. So what is it that we're willing to sacrifice? And that was my biggest aha moment. As well as, oh, my bad.
I was going to say, if I was to follow up with that, when you have those breakthroughs with people, you obviously didn't come up with a solution. You just knew that you both agreed that there was a problem. Mm-hmm. What are the things that Braver Angels are doing to help people then say, okay, I'm willing to compromise this, I'm willing to collaborate here, so that we can come upon a agreed upon solution?
So going with that, we do have policy groups that we're trying to enact, which is where we're having that discussion on what sacrifices we're willing to make. And it's kind of in its infancy stage right now. The biggest skills that I've seen us work on and be really successful on were just understanding that when we're having this discussion, to be civil and not just make it into like a screaming match with, attacks on a person's character rather than their ideas. But we're working on the policy changes and how to combat that as well.
Rob, you talked a little bit a few minutes ago about how if you understand what their values are, if you understand where they're coming from, sometimes it makes it easier. And I know that in the training that Matt and I were blessed to be part of in the legislature through the Next Generation, that's one of the very first things they start with, is a personal journey, so that you can get to know someone, right? It's really hard to be mean to or not like someone that you actually know as a person, as a human being. And if you see them that way, it's harder to rail against them or their ideas, right? Just like you were talking about. And in fact, ironically, just recently in Georgia, there were two legislators from different parties. One was a Democrat, one was Republican, and they had very similar life journeys with a single parent and poverty and other issues that really framed who they were. And they took very different routes because of those, but the instant or the experience was very similar. In fact, they both looked at each other and said, had no idea you had gone through something like that, like I have, right? And I watched them bond over that experience. And you talked about having a friend, right, that has very different ideas and ideology than you, but you go to lunch and you enjoy conversations and you both learn from each other. So do you have a moment in time, or are you willing to share a personal story about a time when maybe either you changed your mind or you mended fences with a family member over a topic that maybe you had disagreed on previously?
Sure. Yeah, I can. It's with a family member, and our family is a lot like other families. We typically don't try to engage much in politics. I probably was the greatest offender in my younger days, but I kind of learned to back off of that. But my relative, he would bring up issues, and he would kind of, you know, you knew that he was watching the news and telling his story, and then I would respond by the news that I heard, and we would never get anywhere. And fortunately, we didn't ever have a break in relationship. But just the last few times we're together, and I'm not together with him very frequently because he lives fairly far away. I've just learned to sit back and listen and ask him about his story and his experience, sort of thing. And I find that he comes back, and I might say something. Yeah, that makes sense. And there's just, and it's kind of slow, so it's not like this huge breakthrough that Rainbow came out and we're singing Kumbaya together. But I just learned that he really wants to be heard, and he wants to be taken serious. And I was trying to do that, and I'm finding that he's reciprocating in that way. Yeah, it's tough. One other technique is like, when you go in thinking you have all the answers and you know firmly where you stand, that when you go in and you already assume that you know what that other person is, that's my biggest problem. I go, well, I know what they're like this. And so I know what they're going to say. And it's a pleasant surprise when I find something different. On these Bravery Angels Zoom meetings, we're getting introduced to other people, and I kind of like play a game. All right, that person's a blue. They're going to be like me because I think I'm more of a liberal. And then, that person's a red. And I love it when I get surprised. I'll hear this guy, he worked in Peace Corps, and he climbs the mountain, and on New Year's Eve in New Hampshire every year. And then he says he was a Republican legislature. And I go, he's not like me. Oh, but he is like me. And so, it's just kind of try to keep that open mind, because, the thing that's so frustrating that I find is it's a concept I learned on a Bravery Angels podcast, and it's the entrepreneurs of conflict, or conflict entrepreneurs, the people who benefit by creating division and conflict. And you can see that in the media. You can see that with politics, because, people say we don't like negative ads, but they work. And so that's what politicians use, because they need to win. And so, we're kind of fighting against forces that are trying to pull us apart when we want to come together. And that's just one of the challenges. And I probably got off answering your question, Kelly. I'm sorry.
No, I thought that was great, actually. Kind of hand in hand with that, Damien, I know that that Rob has shared some tools already to help with conversations and different things, and how to, make that work for you as an individual. But I'm wondering, in the curriculum and tools that that Bravery Angels has developed, if there are tools that you could share with us right now that would help in being effective to deal with divisions in your family, like at the Thanksgiving table that Matt was mentioning beforehand. And I think also, to go along with that, we had a question in the comment section about something similar, asking for tools or ways to help open participants beyond their ideological boundaries. So if you wouldn't mind tackling those couple of things as far as the tools that are available, that'd be great.
Awesome. Yeah. So Bravery Angels' best tools that I have seen have always been the workshops. We have several kinds. The best one, probably for preparing for those Thanksgiving dinners and those politics discussions that we rather not have, is our Family and Politics workshop. That, while we don't have one going on in Idaho as of yet, if you go on the Bravery Angels website, you can sign into a national one whenever it's the most convenient to you that they have going on. And you can learn about skills for how to discuss politics with your family and loved ones. We also have one for depolarizing within, where you, like, if you're a red like me, you learn to speak in a depolarizing manner to other reds, or if you're a blue like Rob, to other blues. And then there's skills for bridging the divide, which is a workshop that we're actually hosting October 30th, which is to help with difficult political conversations with people in your lives, and learn to talk in across the divide in a constructive, empathetic way.
Wonderful.
That would be great. I mean, Kelly and I served together for 6 years, and there were times when we couldn't even do that to each other, and we take pride in that. So it's part of it, right? There's passion in politics, there's passion in policy, but to some of these comments that are coming in the stream, people's ideologies are put ahead of the pragmatic solution, the pragmatic goal, what would work best for everyone, not what would work best for the majority. And so, Rob, speaking of that, one of the ways to do that is by having open discussions and intellectual discussions. And I just learned that Bravery Angels has a book club. And I was wondering, how does the book club work? How do you start a chapter? And then what are you guys reading right now?
Sure. So if you go on we're going to keep referring you to the Bravery Angels website, because just nationally, they advertise all these different book clubs, workshops that are being put on all over the country. And generally they're open to anybody and they're always free. So there is a national book club going on right now, and they're doing the book. It's called American Schism by Seth David Radwell. And the way the book clubs work is typically they'll have, ask people to read the whole book, or if there's going to be in a couple sessions, they might do it, have you read different sections of the book. And then they'll have a moderator, and they'll have someone who helps organize, questions and organize the speakers. And they're done over Zoom, so they're pretty easy to participate in. And they'll have questions. Sometimes they'll pop in a survey in the middle. Like I sat in on one on the book by Senator Ben Sasse called Them. Let's see, his title, Why We Hate Each Other and How We Heal. And so Ben Sasse, he grew up in a small town in Nebraska, and his dad was a coach. And small towns in Idaho too, where high school sports are a pretty key thing that happens in a small community and identity. And so just in the middle of the hour thing on the book discussion, they popped in a survey, and how many people grew up in that type of an environment. And like about half of us who had grown up in that sort of an environment. We have one person who's taken on the task of doing a Bravery Angels book club in Idaho, and he's like me. He doesn't feel particularly confident doing Zoom stuff, but he started one on that book. He's on the Ben Sasse's book. And if anyone is interested in that, you can contact Damien or me. You can find our email addresses on the Bravery Angels website. Just go to the state of Idaho, and our emails show up as the state coordinators, and we can get you in contact with that person if you want to participate in that. Their first meeting is tomorrow, but they plan to have 3 more sessions after that.
There's some comments that have come in, and Damien, I just wanted to ask you a question, this unplanned question. Universities have been under fire a lot lately for a host of reasons. And as a university educator and an instructor, a lot of times I don't think it's been fair. I do think that even at that level, we start talking about things that offer almost no meaning to most people, like CRT and other things. What are you doing on Boise State's campus, especially given that you're going there right now? What are you doing to kind of drive that discussion to where students can have a conversation about those complex, wicked issues that really don't have an easy solution? What's happening, and how could more people get involved?
Great question. So the answer is I am attempting to make a Braver Angels club alliance at BSU, so we can host debates there, host workshops among students, one-on-one conversations, that kind of deal. It's been a little slow going because of the online nature of school with COVID and all. It's a lot harder to get campus involvement from other students when you don't see them in person, but we are making a little headway in there. Also, Boise State, as I said, is doing the Institute for Advancing American Values, which is attempting to address the issue themselves, because they did have a string of complaints last year, which I wouldn't even feel that all of them were fair either, but there obviously is a perception of unfairness, and that needs to be addressed in some way, and they're making strides to do that. So, yeah.
Wonderful. I recently read some information that showed that the nation actually, as a whole, isn't as partisan as what it seems to be portrayed as in the media, or that we seem to hear either on our social media feeds and so forth. And in fact, it was overwhelmingly not that way. That being said, though, that we all know that there are groups, both in the red and the blue camp, that are super hyper partisan, right? And they refuse to compromise. In fact, that's a dirty word. And they seem to help inflame the environment that we're currently in. And so, Rob, I would ask you, how do we deal with people who aren't willing to break out of that groupthink or that hyper partisanship?
I think if you find someone who is in that state of mind and doesn't really want to talk about it, it's very difficult to pursue it. Part of being able to have constructive conversations with people means you need to pick your time and place. In those situations, I would typically just simply offer up that Bravery Angels is trying to do this. And our goal isn't to change people's political perspectives and their political choices, but to help them engage in the idea of America, which is you've got this vast variety of human beings who are trying to figure out how to live on this big continent together in a way that we can maximize our freedoms and do what we want and have great lives, but also understand that we impact each other. And so there's going to be times when we got to figure things out. And it's trying to find those common grounds if you can push somewhere. When I was working in the cleanup site at a Bunker Hill site in Kellogg, that was a community that was hit hard with the loss of mining jobs, and the smelter closed in the 70s, and it was a very tough community to go into with, hey, we're going to come and clean up. I go, oh, great, thanks. That's just what we need now, is that we're the dirtiest community in the nation sort of stuff. But what we found is we didn't necessarily find agreement. People didn't necessarily think the cleanup was a great idea, but they wanted their community to be whole again. And actually, it was interesting. I had a chance to work, for 3 or 4 governors, and each one of them said, yeah, we want to make that community whole again. And the cleanup was part of it. I mean, if you didn't have the cleanup, their future economy wasn't going to go. So it's, in that case, we found like maybe a common goal, but we were approaching it from different perspectives. And that's a lot of what Bravery Angels is about, is trying to find those commonalities. When we did our first, one of our first red-blue workshops in Idaho, I was struck. One of the participants, she was a red, and she was kind of angry at the end. She was going like, why didn't we know that the blues thought like that? There's so many things we have in common. Why didn't we know that? And they were frustrated, but I think it kind of opened their eyes. Hey, there's a place to have conversation. And then from a similar workshop, I got an email from a blue, and they were just saying, for the first time in a lot of years, I felt good going to bed tonight because I don't see the other side as being a bunch of evil people that are trying to destroy our country. And so it's trying to get that breakthrough to show that I'm not engaging in this conversation because I want to defeat you. I'm engaging in this conversation because I care. I care about you, and I care about the country.
Perfect. I know that we've had a couple comments like that from Michael in the comment section that, we're Americans, right? And not forgetting that, not losing sight of that. I agree with one of the key points that you made is that civility is never a tool to silence somebody else's opinion or ideology. Feelings, values, nothing. It's not to get someone to sit down and shut up. It's just the opposite. It's to engage those conversations, engage those differences, seeking to understand and humanize each other. And I think that you made a really neat point when you said, quite often we all have those same common goals, right? We have those same results that we want to see for our community or our state or our country. we're just coming at it from a different perspective, maybe, or a different angle. And no one of us could know everything and have all the answers. So seeking to understand and exploring all the options just makes us better in the long run. So powerful, so important. Thank you, Rob.
Damien, same question, right? On what are we doing to get people to break out of hyperpartisanship? I mean, when you look at, even we've been dealing with this for 10 months, right? We have hyper partisan comments on a civility discussion in the comment field. For somebody who disagrees with you to use the term un-American, for somebody who has a different idea of how to actually deliver on a solution, maybe it's not the best solution. Maybe you disagree with the concept of the solution, but to start to use language that is just so inflammatory, it's so common, and it's common in Idaho. It's common across the entire country. What are you personally doing to help people and to try to work with those people who won't break out of that hyperpartisanship language?
So one of the biggest things to have in mind when discussing with somebody who is using that hyperpartisan language is to understand that change takes time, and expecting one conversation to fix all the issues that are being perceived is unrealistic and unfair personally. But also, I like to have the conversation more with my side personally and try to depolarize within, so they feel that they're being appropriately represented and understand that we can civilly talk about issues that we're seeing and portray them fairly and not feel like we're attacking somebody else, and just keep the conversation on the policy and not the person, because we don't gain anything from attacking other people that are trying to solve issues. We only gain by trying to better the solutions that we're seeing.
That's great. I mean, power for the sake of power doesn't get us as far as we want. Listen, this question is for both of you, and I'll start with you, Damien. If you had to give us a call to action that you would want everyone to hear and you would want to shout from the rooftops from the Boise community, what would it be? Starting with you, Damien.
I would say the one thing I want everybody to leave with is to listen to what other people have to say and to try to silence those, prejudgments you have in your mind, and just learn what they're valuing and what they're trying to do to better their community, even if it's not in a way that you think it's going to be an adequate solution. Just learn that they're trying to help.
Rob?
Yeah. So I'm probably not going to just stick with one. One is like, the social media stuff is so tough. And I think people are a lot nastier on social media than they would be with you in, face to face. So Bravery Angels does have a workshop that they've just developed on how to try to do online discussions without getting hyper partisan. And I actually practiced that with a friend, and it's exhausting because you can't have, there's a nuance and they misunderstand a word. You got to rewrite a whole nother post, and it's back and forth. But, social media is really tough. And then the other thing is, Bravery Angels encourages us to, they have a program that some folks started in California. It says walk a month in my news. And so they team up, reds and blues, and they each are watching the other's news sources, and then they get together and talk about it. And that's one way to do it. But another way, there's many different sites. There's one called All Sides, and they provide, there'd be one particular news story, and it shows how it's covered in media that they say kind of center, and then they go moderately left, moderately right, and then far left, far right, and just see how they're saying that. And you can see how the stories are being covered across the line. And there's another organization called Flipside, and their website, and they show red and blue news on a particular issue. One I like because I'm kind of lazy is called Tangle, and it's by this one journalist, and he provides an overview of the issue, what the right is saying, what the left is saying, and then he gives kind of his take, and he takes a lot of comments and feedback, and he tries to be as fair as he can. And so it's kind of trying to stay away from that stuff where they're throwing out the the red meat to get you all angry. If the news is getting you all angry, then maybe, if you can go find something that maybe might make you feel a little more uplifted. But, as just Bravery Angels, it's hard to do this on your own, and we're here to help you practice and help you engage with people. And it's really fun. Like Damien and I are from different political perspectives, but I love working with Damien, trying to figure out how to do it. So, I would say if you have any inkling of interest in Bravery Angels, it's a volunteer organization. To join us, $12 a month. No one's in it for money. We're in it. We want to help our country get through this very difficult time. And what I'm finding is I'm making great friends. And we have a monthly call that we do here in Idaho, and we spend time practicing the skills and plan events. And our goal is to create alliances. So if you're interested, I would be letting my organization down if I didn't say sign up for braveryangels.org.
Let me just pop that up there for everyone to see, braveryangels.org. Kelly, at first, it's great to be back with you and do another show. It's been a while since I've had the opportunity to co-host. Rob and Damien, thank you so much for having this discussion, for bringing Bravery Angels. Before we go, just real quick, are there any upcoming workshops in the Valley that people could sign up for, or that you're working on, or that you have scheduled?
So we do have the Skills for Bridging the Divide workshop. It's a Zoom workshop, and it's scheduled for Saturday, October 30th at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, 9 a.m. Pacific. And you can go to the website and go to the get involved and then look for events and just go down the list, and you can find that. There's also like 9 family and politics workshops that are scheduled for November. People know that Thanksgiving is coming up and we need to get ready.
Absolutely. Matt, if I could, I'd like to emphasize something that Rob said in his response to some call to actions. And I also want to thank both of you. What an amazing show. It's been great being on with you, and the information you've given me, I've learned and grown, and I really appreciate both of you. I really want to highlight that walk a mile in my news. I love that. What a catchy phrase, having it be a take on walk a mile in my shoes, which is important too, to be able to humanize people. But to walk a mile in my news, so often we do seek out just those things that validate our positions. But that is not seeking to understand. If you're not willing to challenge your beliefs and challenge your value systems and ideology, you're failing to grow. And that's, I think, a detriment to all of us, including yourselves. So just wanted to highlight that again. And thank you both for being on.
Yeah, thank you so much. And really quick, on behalf of Diana Laciando, Luke Malik, myself, and Kelly Packer, we thank you for joining us. This partnership between the Idaho Association of Cities, Smith & Malik Law Firm, and the Boise Chamber has really been an eye-opening experience for the 4 of us. And before we go, I just want to thank our sponsors, Dawson Taylor and Idaho Central, who made it so we could do this, and our other sponsors, Power Engineers, Erdstad Architects, for their support, and our media partners, Idaho Ed News, Idaho Statesman, and the Idaho Press. We'll be back in November, right before Thanksgiving, for something I'm sure will be really fiery, and we'll see you all then. Take care.
Thanks,
everybody.